generation, middle-aged generation, and actually our younger generation as well. And we're also working in, yes, the incarcerated community of men and women who are incarcerated at MCI or at Suffolk County Jail. There's some great things going on to address diabetes, and we're going to talk about that in a few. But again, I just want to thank you all for joining us in another conversation about politics in Boston. Yes, all things Black politics. And actually, I'm going to follow up in some ways, and I'm not going to say steal some ideas and steal some of the conversation that has been had over the past number of hours. Yes, Pastor, yes, Bruce Wall, and my good brother Ron Bell and his group of folks that he invited into the studio had addressed a lot of the issues that I want to continue the conversation about. The politics of gang violence, the politics of violence, and the politics of, yes, anti-violence in Boston. Oh, I was reading in the Boston Herald, and I got to follow up with this because Pastor was talking about this morning as well, Pastor Bruce Wall, and was Ron Bell talking about it as well. The uptick of violence in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park, Roslindale, all around the African American and, yes, people of color community of Boston. And in the Boston Herald, they're covering it. They're talking about it in the Boston Herald, and they're talking about it across the city, and we're going to talk about it today. Yeah, in the Boston Herald. I really like the Boston Globe. I don't know why I picked up the Boston Herald or looked online at the Boston Herald to see what they were talking about in Boston. But I have to comment about it. Today, we're going to talk about the politics of violence and anti-violence in Boston. The decision of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu as well, and her veto of the city council's vote to have an elected school board. Yes, here live on All Things Black Politics, here on Boston Black News. Well, the Boston clergy met to say they had been MIA, missing in action, for 20 years, but now need to step up as a group to make the city take action on the swell of youth violence in the city. Well, hold on and wait a minute. I'm going to give some editorial observations as well. Hold on and wait a minute. MIA for 20 years. Well, they are correct. Actually, they've probably been MIA for some 30 or 40 years, in my humble observation. Not since the time of Martin Luther King and Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes bringing Martin Luther King to the city of Boston. Has there really been a level of effort, significant level effort in Boston to address poverty in the city from the faith-based community? Now there has been, in many ways, some effort on the part of great leaders, such as the late Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes, and others, his former youth pastor, Bruce Wall, yeah, he led the effort as a young man to address violence in the streets and empower young people to address issues of concern that they had. Oh, I remember that back in the 1970s. Now, ministers are saying that we have people in our community, parents and young people alike, who are deeply traumatized and are feeling a sense of powerlessness. Well, that's what Reverend Gregory Grover from the basement of his church, the historic Charles Street AME Church in Roxbury, said, yes, this past Wednesday, the evening before, two men were shot, one fatally, only a mile away in Dorchester. Yeah. The Reverend Grover indicated that we believe, as persons who have been called by God to serve as agents of hope, that in times of despair, it calls for pastors to once again resume our role as productive vessels and voices. Well, hold on and wait a minute. So they admit, the pastors do admit, that it has been a dearth of 20 years. 20 years, they say, they have not been the productive vessel and voices, but they're ready now. Well, wait a minute. You live in community. You know what's going on, but you stay in a little bit of a bubble and ignore the death and destruction that is happening in one of the poorest, economically, poorest communities in Boston and actually in Massachusetts. Yes. Reverend Grover spoke following a weekly meeting of local clergy, community members, and law enforcement called the Violence Reduction Task Force. Well, wait a minute. The Violence Reduction Task Force has been engaged, but disengaged. I'm going to say it again. Has been engaged, but disengaged. You know the old adage, everything has changed and nothing has changed. That's what I'm talking about right now. Everything changing politically with the pastors, but nothing has changed politically with the pastors. The crime statistics released Tuesday evening by the Boston Police Department showed that there is already been 5 fatal shootings in 2023, which is 4 more than during the same time last year. So there's an uptick in violence. There's an uptick in death. But the statistics only ran through January through, yes, Sunday. And there's already been 2 more fatal shootings since the data was released. Factoring in the 17 non-fatal shootings for a year up to that date, that leaves 22 total victims, 8 more than during the same point last year across 18 shooting incidents, which could have been, which could have been more or less. hopefully less, if the pastors actually did something over the past 20 years. I'm talking about collectively. I'm not talking about individually, because we know individually there are some phenomenal pastors in Boston doing the work. I know one for sure that has been doing the work. No, I know two for sure that has been doing the work. No, I know three for sure that have been doing the work. I can keep on going on with the numbers of pastors that I know have been doing the work. But have they been doing it as a collective body? That's the question, my good friends. Have they been doing it as a collective body? Or have they been doing it in their own self-interest? I'm talking about folks that don't come together. There were 10 shooting incidents during the same period in 2022. In 2022, the number of shooting victims dropped 8.1% from the year before, though at 33 fatalities, there were 8 more deaths. Hold on and wait a minute. There are people in government, meaning the Boston Police Department and others, that tout Boston as one of the most safest cities in America. Get over yourself, my good friends. Get over yourself, because tell that to the people that died, that Boston is the most safest city in America. Hold on. There's more. Reverend Grover said that he understands the data shows a decrease in gun-related fatalities over the past 2 years, but those numbers do not tell the whole story. We agree with that, my good friends. They don't communicate the terror that children feel in elementary schools. When we reached an alarming and senseless point of 13-year-olds intentionally being targeted and young women being stabbed, he continued. Well, young and older women, my good friends. Oh, who could forget the incident that happened over there at, I believe it was Franklin Park, where the former head of Medco, Gene McGuire, got stabbed. That was last year, right? The politics of violence and anti-violence. In many ways, it's sickening. Oh, don't get me started, and I'm started today. Reverend Eugene Rivers III, speaking at the press conference following the meeting, said the group is calling for a mobilization of faith communities, and not just Black community churches, he said, but all local faith groups, which he said has been sort of MIA, missing in action, for the last 20 years and not done the things we should have done. Well, hold on and wait a minute again. You know, that's my favorite saying. Reverend Eugene Rivers. Well, I thought that he ran the organization many years ago. He was well respected at one time. I'm not too sure if he is as well respected today. Don't get me started. Both pastors spoke about the powerful relationships between the police and the city administration in the 1990s, which Grover said created a national model for local outreach to quell violence, one of which the community needs to return to. Can I get into this conversation with you for a second now? I was not living in Boston in the 1990s, but I did return to my hometown on a regular basis. And actually, my late brother, yes, Wayne Rock, Detective Wayne Rock, well respected in the Boston community, was working in many ways on the anti-gang violence unit. It was a jump out squad at the time where they would essentially jump out, find folks that were involved in gangs, essentially find folks that had guns on them, and actually put them in jail. And the debate that I used to have with my dear late brother was, yeah, you're putting everybody in jail, all these young people, you're giving them 10, 5, 10, 15 years, but they're going to come out at some point and create havoc in the same communities that they were in before. If there is nothing in the system that is changing their life trajectory in terms of their thinking. And I was right, my good friends, because they have come back. The violence has come back. Well, hold on. There's more. Rivers compared the public schools in Boston to an elite university in and around the city, as well as government buildings. At those institutions where violence is rare to strike, they have armed private security guards and, yes, police forces. Now, if the State House, the City Hall, and Harvard and MIT and BU can have armed security guards where there is no crime, how in God's name do you make an argument, therefore, that in the most violent neighborhoods, there should be no security? I don't. It's inexplicable. Well, that's what Gene Rivers is saying. Hey, guess what? There's a debate about that too. Do you want armed police in schools? Do you want this Roxbury section, the Dorchester section, the Mattapan section to be a armed camp of sorts, similar to what happens in Israel with the Palestinians? Not sure that's the solution. Well, that's the conversation for today. We're going to talk about this at length even more. You know the number, 301-715-8592. Again, 301-715-8592. Sorry about that. Let me do that again. 301-715-8592. We're taking phone calls. 301-715-8592. When you dial that number, don't forget there's a meeting ID that you're going to have, because this is live here from Washington, D.C., and we have the opportunity to bring people on, but you got to have the password and the meeting code. Sorry about that. That's technology. The meeting code is 884-745-52047. Long number, 884-745-52047. And the password is 748535. You call in to that number, 301-715-8592. You can get involved in this conversation, because guess what? The politics of anti-violence in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan is just that. Politics. Can we get away from the politics of it all and actually be concerned about the violence and what needs to be done, and not have a meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. Let's do something about it. Well, hold on and wait a minute. There's additional conversation that I want to have with you today, and that is the politics of vetoes. I'm going to say it again, the politics of vetoes. You know what a veto is? Get some water. You know what a veto is? A veto is something that mayors and governors and actually the president of the United States have control over. There's legislation that is approved by Congress or city councils or that type of thing. And then the chief executive has the ability to reject the legislation, to veto the legislation, to say, nope, no good. We're not doing this. And guess what? Mayor Wu, who we have had on this broadcast, All Things Black Politics, when she was running for office and said that she wanted a hybrid school committee, has vetoed, essentially put the stamp on it saying reject to the Boston City Council of its decision to return to an elected school committee. Oh, yeah. Isaiah Thompson over at the Bay State Banner covered it well just recently. I love Black media, by the way. And by the way, Boston Black News has covered this topic just this morning, but I'm just going to give my flavor on it as someone that had fought against the Boston School Committee back in the 1970s. Oh, you remember when I was actively involved some people called me a radical. I don't know how they got that. But some folks used to call me a radical. And actually, the Boston School Committee back in 1971 said that I needed to be arrested for inciting people, Black folks, Black boys and girls, or young men and young ladies, to stay out of school because of a bigoted, racist school committee and a bigoted and racist school system that was de facto segregated. Oh, we went and we demonstrated. Oh, for about 5 to 6 months, actually, a lot of folks stayed out of school. Oh, that was massive back in 1971. Well, everything has changed again, and nothing has changed. I'm going to say it again. Everything has changed, and nothing has changed, including folks that speak with forked tongue. You got to watch out for people that speak with fork tongue. You know what I'm talking about. People that say one thing when they want to get elected and will come on Boston Black News and Boston Praise Radio and TV and All Things Black Politics and say one thing about the importance of the Black voter, about the importance of representation, about the importance of empowerment, and then speak, enact, in fork, tongue. I said fork like F-O, spell it right? F-O-R-K, fork, tongue. Don't get it twisted. Yeah, Isaiah Thompson over at the Bay State Banner has a great article, and he talks about how last week supporters returned and discussed the whole issue of the Boston School Committee. On Wednesday, the Boston City Council members passed albeit narrowly a home rule petition that would have created such a body with 13 voting members of a new school committee, elected school committee, 9 elected by city districts and 4 at large, mirroring the structure of the Boston City Council itself. Hear, hear. But the mayor rejected it, even though she says that she is for representative government. Aren't we all in support of representative government? Government for the people, by the people? Well, the mayor vetoed it, even though the voters in a recent election passed essentially a resolution, for the lack of a better word, that said that they wanted, the voters of the city of Boston want an elected school committee. I do too. From the outside looking in, here in Washington, D.C., looking at my hometown of Boston, it makes common sense and logic. City Council law, Ricardo Arroyo chaired the council's Committee on Government Operations, said the measure and its passage in the council represented no less than an enactment of the will of Boston voters who overwhelmingly approved the 2021 ballot measure calling for an elected school committee. Go ahead, Ricardo Arroyo. He's right. He is right, my good friends. The sad thing is that the mayor doesn't understand. Oh, by the way, I respect the mayor. I think she's doing some good things. Don't get me wrong. But on this one, she's off base. Yeah. 2 days later, the Boston mayor, Wu, voted the measure. Or should I say, vetoed the measure, putting a decisive end to this round of political maneuvering and leaving little ambiguity on where she stands on the return to a fully elected school committee. And I'm with brother City Councilor Arroyo, who called the veto disappointing. He is right. I'm totally disappointed as well. Actually, the mayor, or at the time, the person that was running for mayor, Michelle Wu, came on our program, this program, All Things Black Politics, and talked about the importance of representation. I'd love to replay the tape on that one. I will at some point. But she said at the time that she was in support of a hybrid. I actually looked at her side-eyed in some ways, wondering out loud if a hybrid was appropriate for the city of Boston. Maybe, just maybe, there should be representative government. Well, if the city council can be representative government and you align the city council election similar to a proposed Boston School Committee model, what's the problem? Well, Wu argued, as she has repeatedly argued, that moving to a fully elected school committee, at least for now, would undermine her ability to bring much needed changes to the Boston school system or the Boston schools during a critical time, which she repeated threats of state takeover and ever looming in the background. Hogwash. Yep, I called it the way it is. Hogwash. There have been many mayors in the city of Boston over the past 30 years that have run the same argument. And the Boston public schools is still as bad as it was when I went to the Dearborn School, and windows were broken, education was poor, Black teachers, except for a few, didn't exist. Black counselors didn't exist. Violence was rampant. Now, I'm not going to say that I didn't like Dearborn, by the way. I loved the Dearborn School. And we adapted. But in 74 or 72, the NAACP said, hey, listen, let's take this institution, the Boston Public Schools, to court because of its de facto segregation. And let's desegregate the Boston Public Schools. And since that time and before that time, everything has changed and nothing has changed. We've had a couple of Black superintendents. Everything has changed and nothing has changed. We've had new mayors. Everything has changed and nothing has changed. Maybe, just maybe, it's time for an elected school board. Actually, it's not maybe, it's a must. Well, in a letter accompanying her veto, Wu wrote, respectfully, I cannot support the legislative changes that would compromise our ability to stabilize and support the public schools during this critical period. Well, all mayors have said the same thing over the past 30 years. Oh, critical mass. We're going to change the school system for the better. And look at the data, look at the statistic. Let's be data driven, my good friends. The data is horrific about the Boston public school system. How many folks are graduating? How many folks get opportunities for advancement to colleges and universities? How many folks are dropping out of school? How many Black teachers are in the school system? How many Black administrators are in the school system? Well, there was a one-on-one hiring of Black teachers for a little while, right? Look at this. Nothing has changed. While the mayor did not directly cite it, even supporters of the home rule petition have shared publicly and privately a concern that the school committee elections could draw not only questionable outside spending, but the kind of partisanship and special interest driven politics that has swept the school committees across the country. Forget about the school committees across the country. We were talking about Boston. Well, by the way, in most of the school departments across the country, they are elected representative government. And by the way, it is in many ways a governmental entity, the Boston Public Schools. It's the first school system in the country. And by the statistics alone, it could be one of the worst school systems in the country. Follow the data, my good friends. Follow the data. Wu has never said that she supported fully reversing the 1992 change that replaced the elected school committee with an appointed entirely by the mayor. Yeah, she didn't say, and I will agree. She never said that she supported an elected school committee, even when she came on our program, when she was running for office. But here's the deal, my good friends. The people have spoken. They want, meaning the people, the city of Boston residents, want an elected school committee. So give it to them. And that's what the city council did. And I salute the city council for doing the work, to empowering us. The fact is, she is repeatedly, including on her mayoralty campaign trail, even here on Boston Black News, she said she supported a so-called hybrid model, with some elected and some appointed by the mayor. So this is nothing but power. This is an interest of power, not an interest of representation. So you appoint someone, not elect someone. Do you think that the person that is appointed is going to do all of your bidding? Or should the elected school committee be the ones that do the bidding of the parents, of the students, of the people impacted by public education? You know, she said on GBH, I always say W in front of GBH. She said on GBH News that she may take a look differently about this hybrid school committee. The fact is that clearly she still supports a hybrid school committee, even though the voters have said they want an elected school committee, not a hybrid. When asked a day after the council's vote whether she intends to offer up her own legislation to implement a hybrid model or any other change to the existing school committee, Wu said, "I haven't decided." Now, there's some frustrated people in the city of Boston. Actually, the frustration was communicated actually on Boston Black News and Boston Praise Radio and TV today. Now, I heard Reverend Priscilla talk about it on the program. She called in to Ron Bell's program, if I'm not mistaken, excuse me, just to say that she was disappointed at the mayor's decision, not listening to the people that, yes, count, the voters and the people that count, the children and the people that count, the parents. And there is a frustrated city council who have said that, yeah, the ball's now in Wool's court. The ball now is in Wool's court, nobody else's court, Wool's court. The mayor has always been public about her supporting a hybrid school model. And we didn't send her a hybrid school model, so it shouldn't be surprise to anyone that she hasn't been or wasn't supportive, says Laura, City Councilor Kendra Lara. Well, surprise, surprise. It should be no surprise, Laura. No, it should be a surprise that the mayor doesn't follow the voices of the people in this regard. Laura, you're wrong. We should be surprised that the mayor does not follow the voters' position on this issue. See, change is important. I'm going to say it again. Change is important. People should be able to change their observations and their opinions based on I'm talking about politicians. They should be able to change their position based on what guidance they get from the public. So, Laura, sorry. I don't normally say to people they're wrong, but in this case, Kendra Lara, you're wrong. But let's try to get her on the program at some point and see what position she's taking now. But to think that voters in the city of Boston overwhelmingly voted in favor of an elected school committee, I think the city council, as a representative of its constituents, sent a home rule representative of what our constituents and the public want to see. So you're right on that. If the mayor wants to send something back, says Lara, if she wants to work with the council for us to get as close as possible to what the voters are asking for, then we are willing to work to make this happen. Huh? I'm not sure if the mayor is committed to actually working with you on developing a elected school committee. The fact is that advocates are supporting the council's home rule petition, and they voiced their disapproval and echoed calls for the mayor to negotiate. One person, Lisa Green, chair of Boston's for an elected school committee, an advocacy group that grew out of the ballot question supporting the 2021 yes vote, she says it seems that the mayor is walking back on her quoted commitment as a mayor to work with the city council on the home rule petition and her campaign commitment to a hybrid model by saying now isn't the right time for anything. Oh, there's more. Miss Green, Lisa Green, says she is not wanted to come to the table on this issue at all. So hearing her say that she wants to or hasn't made a decision on whether she was going to offer a counterproposal, well, I would strongly encourage her, she says, this is Miss Green, that she do that. Keep the faith with the voters. Well, complicating the picture somewhat is a messy vote that mocked the passage of the council's petition. While the measure was expected to pass the council, as one of its members have come out as directly opposed to the elected school committee, the final vote was 7-5. Yeah, revealed cracks in the facade of unity in the council community. Yeah, the splitting of the vote was pretty interesting. In the end, 5 council members, and check this, my good friends, because it's important. Aaron Murphy, Michael Flaherty, Frank Baker, Brian Worrell, and Council President Ed Flynn voted against the measure, while Kenzie Bach voted present, effectively abstaining. So Aaron Murphy, Mike Flaherty, Frank Baker, Brian Worrell, that's a surprise. And Council President Ed Flynn voted against the measure, while Councilor Kenzie Bach voted present. At-large Councilor Michael Flaherty offered an 11th-hour amendment on the floor that sought to completely restructure the school committee as it had emerged from the council committee, replacing it with a smaller 5-member body elected entirely at large. That's a no-go. And I don't blame it that the amendment failed. What kind of, well, what was that? So as you can see, the issue of the Boston School Committee is a tough one for all of us. The question is, what is the city council and what is the elected bodies? I'm talking about the state reps and the state senators and the politicians on the federal level. Are they going to pressure the mayor in some ways to do the right thing? And what about the faith-based community? Yeah, I know they're trying to handle, after 20 years, the uptick in violence in the city of Boston. Well, why don't they get involved in the education process as well? Because it is so important to us and how we live in the city of Boston. Get involved. It's time to put pressure on the mayor. All those black folks that ran around, endorsing and supporting Mayor Wu. Now it's time to put pressure on Mayor Wu to do the right thing for the city of Boston. That's my observations. That's my opinion. And guess what? I could be right. You have been listening to All Things Black Politics live here from Washington, D.C. I appreciate you turning in and turning on to this broadcast. And actually, you'll hear this broadcast every Friday. Yes, every Friday, 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock, here on Boston Black News. Again, thank you for tuning in. We're about 1 minute away from shutting down this broadcast, but guess what? I am so happy that you have been engaged in this conversation with me today. And as I said, I look forward to sharing with you in the upcoming weeks the work that we are doing in the African American community around health disparities in Boston's Black community of Roxbury. Over there at Orchard Gardens, over there in Academy Homes, and over there at former Bromley Hill Heath, now Mildred Haley Apartments. We're doing some good work educating folks about diabetes from a African American perspective with the African American Diabetes Association. Actually, I have to give a shout out to Pastor Bruce Wall for his support of our effort, and Pastor Franklin Hobbs for his support of our efforts, and of course, Brother Eric and all the other team members at Boston Black News and Boston Praise Radio and TV. So that's it for now. I appreciate you. God bless. This has been Leon Rock at All Things Black Politics. Good day.